The push for tighter gun control. President Trump will meet with lawmakers from both sides of the aisle tomorrow to talk about legislation possibilities that could prevent more tragedies like the Florida school shooting. He spoke with the governors of the country yesterday and assured them he's ready to take action.
I had lunch with Wayne LaPierre, Chris Cox, and David Lehman of the NRA. And I want to tell you, they want to do something. And I said, fellas, we got to do something. We're going to do very strong background checks. Very strong. We've got to do background checks. If we see a sicko, I don't want him having a gun.
Meanwhile, House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy yesterday with me on the program saying that there's support for a plan to revamp the background check program.
That is actually sitting in the Senate today, but what's really important is the part of that bill that fixes the NIC, the National Instant Criminal Background Check. Because had that worked, that shooter in Texas never would have had a weapon as well.
Later in the day, that legislation in the Senate hit a snag when Utah's Mike Lee reportedly moved to slow the passage of the bill. Joining us this morning is Axios Editor-in-Chief Nick Johnston. Nick, good to see you. Thanks for weighing in here. Do you think lawmakers will take action here?
I think we're at a bit of an impasse here. Like you said, there's wide agreement in improving this background check situation, but when it went through the House previously, it was attached to something on concealed carry, which killed it with Democrats in the Senate. And now in the Senate, you see Chuck Schumer saying the bill needs to be included with other things. There's other pieces that need to be included, not just this one. And so very similar to the immigration debate 2 weeks ago, as all these additional things were piled on and the bills eventually died, this is exactly what we're seeing today in the House and the Senate. As we wrote on Axios.com this morning, this is a mess.
I know, but you know what? The truth is that there are laws on the books already. We were talking about this morning. First, we would like to see that those laws are actually that they are actually followed, before you start talking about putting new laws on the books.
Well, that's a huge position taken by a lot of Republicans and sort of allies of the NRA, saying that there are a lot of rules out now that aren't being enforced, that a lot of procedures aren't being followed by the FBI and local law enforcement. So additional changes to legislation won't make any difference. Of course, Democrats don't agree with that at all and say there are certainly rules need to be changed to keep these kinds of guns out of the hands of certain types of people, as President Trump just alluded to. And again, they're talking past each other right now. They came back from a week off, a week break back home, back in the Senate yesterday, no progress.
You know, Nick, I am fascinated by this whole thing because 9 out of 10 Americans, more than that actually, support stricter gun control laws. They want more action done. And when we looked at the immigration debate, there wasn't that much. There was still maybe 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 wanted something to be done, but nowhere near this level of support. And if Republicans and Democrats can't get together on this, I'm not sure what they can get together on. But my question is, who's going to be blamed if nothing gets done right now? Is it going to be the Republicans or the Democrats? Because the Democrats are coming to the table and saying, okay, Republicans are willing to compromise, but we're not going to take that unless we add 5 more things onto this bill. So I'm curious what you think.
That is the perfect partisan question to ask during a midterm election year. We spoke to a senior Republican in the Senate last week about what's going to happen with gun control. And he says, we don't think Congress is equipped to deal with it. We won't be able to figure it out the same way we couldn't figure it out with immigration. They're throwing up their hands, and that's immediately what starts. There's a blame game starts. Democrats saying Republicans will face a harder challenge in the midterms. Republicans saying the same about Democrats. Every day an election gets closer, which makes me less optimistic about any kind of big movement on legislation.
Well, Nick, part of the problem is that people on the right who believe in the Bill of Rights, who stand by the Constitution of the United States, that they're being shamed into, if you don't agree with these students in Parkland, Florida, then you somehow support the death of children in our schools. And that's the rhetoric that you're hearing out there. And quite frankly, a lot of these proposals, I'm not talking about fixing the background check system, which, by the way, when we had the assault weapons ban from 92 to 94 to 2002, gun crime did fall, but all the studies that I've read attributed that to better background checks, not the banning of a few more than a dozen types of weapons in this country. But a lot of these proposals have no evidence behind them to prove that they would work. And if you go back and look at the types of crimes that we're talking about, the laws that are being proposed wouldn't have prevented the ones that we've had in the past.
Yeah, but I think what you touch on very clearly is the charged social media environment about that, about both sides are very hard posed on their positions and are speaking right past each other. That gets back to what was mentioned earlier about Delta being attacked for the discounts it gave to the NRA, which is something it gives to any kind of group that has many millions of members that regularly challenge. They've now been attacked on social media and have rescinded that deal, while FedEx, facing the same thing, says we're not going to change our policy.
Well,
I think that just gets exactly same on immigration. To fight, the both sides are so far apart and are so adamant about their sides, it's very difficult to find that middle ground.
With the issue of the NRA, I think that what a lot of companies miss and a lot of politicians miss, it's not just the few million members of the National Rifle Association. It is the many more in this country who feel like I have a constitutional right to arm myself. And ironically enough, because there's been such a failure of law enforcement time and again in protecting people and keeping a weapon out of the hands of somebody who never should have gotten one, like a Dylan Roof, for example, that people feel more compelled to arm themselves because law enforcement's failing them. And I think that politicians are missing that undercurrent in this country.
I think it's also an incredibly difficult tightrope for CEOs to walk. We've written about this a lot on Axios, about how corporations are being thrust into these contentious debates on immigration, on climate change, and now on gun control. And like you said, there are millions of people probably protesting these companies for the discounts they give. The NRA has millions of supporters and millions of people support their policies, and that's a bad place if I'm running a business to be in.
I can't help but look at this and say the NRA now has become equated with all that is evil, rather than saying that these are people who are supporting their constitutional right. And so companies are making a decision not based on the NRA and those people, but rather they're making decisions based on what that symbolizes. And I think that's really dangerous.
It is. You're right.
And there's also a political blowback on that, as you'll see in Georgia, where now Republican state legislatures are saying, well, we're going to go after a tax break for Delta on that, where there are political consequences on both sides of this debate.
With that, I think that we would agree that that's, again, a political overstep on the other side of this. But this comes down to, Nick, us having to have a discussion about mental illness in this country, and that's also a civil liberties question of trying to make changing the civil commitment laws at the state level.
I know that's something that the president has talked a lot about. We haven't seen any kind of legislation on that. I'm looking very closely to see what the president comes out of this meeting, if he's able to sort of cut some kind of deal. Remember, the President Trump said to the governors yesterday that sometimes Republicans have to go against the NRA if it's not in their best interests. There's a lot, sort of our political reporting shows that he's probably the only one who can give cover to Republicans to sort of take that kind of step. I'll be fascinated to see what comes out of that meeting tomorrow.
Yeah, you're right. All right, Nick, thanks very much for your insights.
Absolutely.
Nick Johnston joining us, Axios.